Welcome to another episode of Around the House. I'm your host, Steve O'Brien, and we're here today for a half an hour today. We're going to talk about painting. I'm joined by Mr. Dan Masse from the Masse Group. Dan is a professional painter. He's a fourth generation painter, and he owns his own business. He was kind enough to come back for another show, and today we're going to talk about rollers, how to clean paint rollers, how to apply paint with the paint roller. We've got a number of different topics we're going to talk about regarding painting. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan. And Dan, why don't you tell our viewers, before we get too far, your website and your contact information if they want to contact you.
Thanks, Steve, for having me again also.
Yeah, no problem.
And website is www.massegroup.com, and the email address is dan@massegroup.com.
Very good. And if anybody has a question or comment for Dan, Dan wouldn't mind hearing from you at all. Anything, even a comment on how he did something, if you might agree with him or have a tip, maybe you can even pass along to Dan that you might know. Dan, we're going to start out. I got a couple of things I want to get out of the way before we get too far into the paint rollers. You were on our last show that we had with you. We didn't have enough time to cover it, so I'd like to. It's very important, and I have more questions, but I can only ask so many. We don't have too much time. But first question I have is regarding pine. Here's a piece of pine here that is raw pine, and as you can see, there's a big knot right there. And I've always had issues with knots, and I've tried with the spray stuff you can buy. There's Kills and there's Bins are the two big names. And I've tried both of them, sprayed the knot, waited till it dried, and then I'd apply. Most cases I'd use a latex paint. And the knot would always bleed through. What am I doing wrong?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, you're using the right product, Steve. So what you want to do is you want to use a shellac-based primer.
Isn't that what the Bins and the Kills
Exactly, and that's what we have here, similar to this. It's a shellac-based primer, and I think what you want to do with the knots, a lot of the wood today it's newer generation wood. So some of the older type of wood we used to buy it, the knots had already kind of done their bleeding and all that stuff. So with the newer stuff, you want to probably put a couple of coats of that stuff on there.
And would you also recommend if it's possible to do it before you put the material in place, to do the backside also?
Absolutely.
Is that another reason why it was bleeding through?
It definitely doesn't. It definitely helps to prime all six sides of the board if you have the opportunity to.
Okay.
Before it goes up.
Okay, and then you would finish it with a oil base or latex. What's the best paint to use for something like that?
You could go over it with either or today, as long as the knot's sealed. You have the opportunity to you can go over it with oil base or latex based paint.
Okay, so but you can put an oil base down as a primer coat, and you can put a latex over it. It doesn't matter.
Correct. You can't do in reverse.
You can't put a latex with an oil on top.
Correct. It won't adhere to itself.
Very good point. Well, that's about what I wanted to know for that. Now, here's the other big question, and a lot of people probably have this question also. I brought in a piece of this, and what this is the newest product. It's been out for a few years, quite a few years now. It's called, the brand name is AZEK, but there's many different brand names. This is just a brand name that I particularly, at my lumberyard, that they carry. It's called AZEK, but what it is, it's a PVC material, and as you can see, it's same thickness as that pine board we just had. So it simulates what a piece of pine would be, and as you can see, it's already colored if you like white. There's no knots to deal with, but the downside to it, it's very expensive. But the good things outnumber the bad things. It doesn't rot, no termites or insect infestation problems. But the one problem, and it's not a problem if you know how you do it, painting it. Yep. It's such a smooth surface. I was nervous about what kind of paint you'd put on that, and would you prime that? Would you rough it up? How would you get that paint to stay on that?
That's a good question, Steve, because a lot of people now are switching over to this just because of the long-term cost savings to use a piece of wood, trim like that. But a lot of people are scared to put something on there because of it's smoother compared to the type of wood that you would use.
Right, and I would
or
think you
something.
could scrape it with your fingernail and the paint would come right off.
Right. So there's a couple of things you want to use, and you can go to the manufacturer. Every manufacturer has their own recommendations, but what we found is if you have a board like that, you want to scuff it real quick with a piece of 220 grit sandpaper,
Okay,
and that creates a little bit of a profile on it.
okay.
And then you want to go back over that with a rag, just wipe that off. And then you have a bonding primer that they sell.
A bonding primer?
That's made specifically for AZAC. It's actually meant to go on top of tile and plastic.
No
it's
kidding.
For a lot of glossy
didn't know that.
surfaces. And depending on what color you do, we did a house in Plymouth recently this summer where they actually had the boards were white, but they ended up going dark green on the trim. So you can have the primer tinted to whatever the top coat's going to be.
Okay, so
help with the
you'd
coverage.
have it tinted, so you wouldn't have to put the top coat more than one coat maybe?
Yeah, we typically, we usually do one primer and 2 coats of finish.
One primer and 2 coats.
You just get a lot more durability out of the project.
And what's the longevity of a paint job on this?
So this stuff versus typically on a paint job on some of the wood trim, you might get 7, depending on where your location is. Obviously, if you're on the water, the salt water eating at it. But typically, you'd get 5 to 7 years out of a decent paint job. With this stuff, we've done, I've seen this stuff around for about 10 years now. We've done jobs 10 years ago, and it's just, it looks like you just did it.
Wow. You know what I noticed though with this, and I think maybe you'd be a better judge than me because you're around it more than me as far as painting and power washing. I mean, you do all that stuff before you paint a house. I know. Right. This seems like it attracts the mold a little more than the wood. Is there a difference? Or is it just...
It does, but the thing is, it's a lot easier to clean if you keep up with maintenance. I recommend that people power wash. Depending on the side of the house, obviously your north side versus your south side.
How about using bleach?
Bleach is it's a good idea. The thing is, there's so many different products now on the market that you can mix with the bleach to dilute the bleach. There's a couple of products that you put in as additives that doesn't have the harmful chemicals that bleach does. That you want to mix with water and read the directions, but it should take most of that mildew right off.
Okay, because that's a big problem. You got to get that off before you do any painting of anything.
Exactly.
Okay, that'll pretty much clear up most of what I had to issues with that plastic. So I'm hoping some of the viewers' questions might have been answered also. Now, Dan, I'm going to let you also go into another category here where we're going to talk about paint rollers. We talked about in the last show you came on, we talked about paint brushes quite a bit. And the other big part of your business is the rolling.
Right.
There's walls, there's ceilings. It's mostly used inside, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we didn't see a lot of roller use on the exterior of a house. It's mainly used on the inside. I mean, there is some applications on the outside. You may use it for a porch ceiling or something of that nature. But typically, you find a lot of these on the applications of an interior of a project.
Okay, and you've got quite an assortment here. Now, again, I know there's different applications for different, they call it the nap, right?
Correct.
The thickness of the roller is the nap.
Yep.
And why don't you go over some of these,
Sure.
what their applications are for our viewers?
So when you go to purchase a roller, it's going to tell you the nap size and it's going to give you the width of the roller. Now, typically, most people will purchase a 9-inch roller for most residential.
That would go with this.
Correct.
This here.
Correct.
So that's a 9-inch roller.
Right. It would just fit, the sleeve would just fit right over the frame, and that's how you would put the roller on.
That's what I'm familiar with. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what most people are familiar with. Then you get into some of the larger projects, some of the new construction, commercial projects. This puts it on a lot faster pace. It's basically
sure.
double the size. It's an 18-inch roller.
Okay.
It's a different frame that we use for this.
So obviously you need a wider pan to go with that.
Correct.
This one here is just pretty standard size.
Right. Matter of fact, I have the pan right here. For that size, you'd probably want to use something like this. It'll fit right in there.
Oh,
Obviously,
I've
the 18 won't fit in there. So
seen those, and they hook right on the edge.
correct.
And you can roll it. It's got a little taper to it.
Yep. So what you do is, you take this when you're done, when you put your roller in, you put it in there like that.
Okay.
And then, you just hook it right on the edge.
I'll tell you something that's a lot easier to carry around too. It's got a little handle and everything.
Yeah, it definitely beats the flat trays.
Yeah,
You
that's
see a lot of people, and when we get into these things, a lot of people with the flat trays will end up kicking them, or
I've done that myself
Yeah.
because and when you go to pick it up, the paint's just barely spilling out of it. So
Exactly.
that is definitely a nice tool, that bucket.
Yeah, and you can get those at pretty much any home improvement center.
And you can use that with that roller right there.
Yep.
That's a good tool to have. Now, you've got still so many more rollers. I'll let
Right.
you finish explaining the sizes.
Yeah, so the different sizes that we talked about, the 9 and the 18, and then we have the different nap sizes, and obviously this is another what we call a hot dog roller. And the reason, it looks like a hot dog, that's how they get the name from it.
Yeah, it does.
And there's different types of applications you can use on this. If you're doing, say, spindles in a house,
Oh,
you can roll it with this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So a lot of times if you're going to get into some of the polyurethanes and things like that nature, you want to get into a smaller nap roller. This is what they call a mohair roller. And it will tell you right on there it's for high gloss enamels.
Okay.
So if you're ever into putting polyurethane on, you need a really good finish.
Smooth finish.
Smooth finish, that's
Okay.
what you want to use. And then you get into the different size of the nap. Obviously this nap, this is probably 3/4 inch nap.
It's
And
pretty heavy.
This is pretty heavy duty, and this is for the stucco ceilings.
Okay.
Stuff, that's
Now,
give
how
it a
come
lot of
that's so
texture.
small, it's short? How come it's not a wide roller?
Well,
like
you can
the
get
other
it in the
9-inch?
9 also.
Okay, you can, okay.
These we use a lot in closets, and
Okay.
and the reason is you just have a lot more movability inside of a closet.
And I noticed the edges of the roller are cut back a little bit.
Yep, they're tapered.
So you don't hit the wall.
Correct. Yep, and it keeps a nice coat on the wall at all times.
Okay.
So that's basically the roller aspect in the different. Again, just what you want to look for is you want to look for the nap. This is it goes as low as an 1/8 inch.
Okay.
All the 3/16, half inch to even make an 1.5 inch roller.
Okay.
Which is probably double the size of this as far as width,
Okay.
depending on what you're doing. Most
Excellent.
people are doing walls. You want to go with either the 5/16 or the 3/8.
For a smooth finish?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you're
That's
doing-
normally on like a regular plastered wall.
Correct.
Okay. You're going to demonstrate for us also how the best way to apply paint with a roller onto a wall.
Yeah.
And the cutting in techniques and stuff
Exactly.
like that.
So when you get into painting a wall, what you want to do, first of all, you want to cut in what they call cut in, which is you take your brush, and I know you watch a lot of these TV shows, and there's different ways that people do things, but the proper way to do it is if you have a wall, picture a wall in front of you, and you have the window edges, and you have the ceiling, and you have your baseboard, and all the trim that's in the room. You want to take your brush and you want to cut in that area first. So what you're doing is you're cutting the wall color up against the trim. But what you want to do is keep what they call a wet edge, which basically is that you want to make sure that before you pull the roller out, that you only worked enough to a point where the paint's still wet and able to roll back into it. And the reason for that is it will flash. So
it'll flash, meaning that when the paint's dry, you'll see a glossy, where you cut in, you'll see a little glossy spot that
Right.
it doesn't look like it's dry
Exactly.
to match the rest.
and it'll look like it's a different finish. And sometimes you'll see people, they'll cut the whole room, and that's probably the worst thing you can do. You just want to work as far as you can get.
So do a section at a time.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. I hope everybody's listening, paying attention, because I know I get up on a step ladder and I cut in the whole, because I get into a kind of a groove, and I start trimming and painting the trim and everything, cutting in. And what happens is I get carried away, and
Right.
then I go to do the rolling, and next thing I know, just like you said, it's dry. It's
Right.
starting to dry. So that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Now, not to interrupt you, now when you're using a roller and you're actually painting on the flat wall, there's a trick when you're using the roller. You're not really going straight up and down,
Correct.
are you?
No. What you want to do is you put your roller onto the frame, and you snap it right in there, and then let's just pretend this is the wall right here.
Okay.
So most people, they just want to get the paint on. They'll just go up and down like this.
Right.
And what it does is it creates lines in your paint, which you don't want. So what you want to do is you want to almost go like in a W pattern. You want to go up and you want to come back down like this, and you just want to make sure it's totally covered.
Oh, okay.
But your last stroke, what you want to do is go from basically as far as you can get up on the ceiling to the baseboard, just straight up and down.
Okay.
To feather everything in. Another trick of the trade is when you're up against the ceiling, to eliminate a lot of the cut lines. Let's just say that's the top of the ceiling right here. You want to roll as close to the ceiling as you can get.
Right. So you're just catching where you cut in.
Correct.
It's close to ceiling. I've done that. Okay.
And the same thing
So-
if you're next to a piece of trim, say this is a window frame, you want to cut it, you roll it as close as you can to that.
Gotcha. Very good. Very interesting. I learned something. Now, there was one other thing we talked about before the show that Dan was going to pass along to the viewers, and I thought it was a pretty cool trick. You mentioned something about using tape on the roller.
Yes.
Explain that to our viewers. I thought that was a pretty cool trick.
Yeah, so when you take a roll out of the package like I just did here, there's a lot of times from the factory there'll be lint and basically fuzz on the roller, for lack of a better term. You take a piece of tape, and I don't have any with me, but you basically reverse the tape. So you have the sticky side out facing the roller, and you just kind of wipe it down the roller. And what it does is it loosens, it takes all that fuzzy stuff off, and you basically get a nice smooth finish on the wall.
So you do that before you paint, like a smooth surface, so that
Exactly.
you don't have the little fuzz.
Right.
And I've had that happen to me, the little fuzzies, and I'm picking them off,
yeah.
and they're making a mess.
Yep.
But that's a good trick.
It's a great trick
I
to
hope
use.
somebody got something from that, because
Yep.
I certainly did. Now, Dan, we're going to go into. We've done all our rolling, and we're ready to clean up.
Sure.
Why don't you explain how we clean rollers? Is it similar to brushes?
It is to a certain extent. I mean, the tool for some of the larger rollers is the same.
We seen that on our last show.
Yep.
You did the brushes with that.
Yeah, this is technically called a brush spinner, but we also use it for the roller. And what you do is you'd put the roller in here, and you basically put it into a 5-gallon bucket, and you stick it in there, same thing, and you get it wet, and you spin it, and it will actually remove a lot of the excess paint.
That is fantastic. It works for rollers too.
Absolutely.
So I've never saved a roller. I just chuck them out. Because the rollers, I mean, how much is a roller like that? What's the cost for a roller like that?
The microfibers, they go anywhere from $8 to $10.
That much?
Yeah.
So it's worth a while. In your business, where you're using them every day,
Right.
that would add up a lot of money
Sure.
if you were just throwing them away.
Right.
Now, another trick, why don't you show us that trick? If you say we're gonna use this roller the next day, say we didn't finish the room, and we were gonna, and if you say you weren't gonna finish your room, here's another thing. You would probably, I've learned this over the years, and to me it's common sense, but if you were gonna finish, say, do part of the room one day, and you'd stop it in the corner, right?
Correct.
You obviously wouldn't stop in the middle of the room.
Right.
So you stop painting, and you don't want to go, you might be pressed for time, whatever the case, and you want to save the roller, but you don't want to clean it out. Show us how you do that.
Yeah, there's a great little trick you can do. Typically if you save the packaging that the roller came in, you can just put it right back in the sleeve wet. So, if the roller's wet, you put it right back in the sleeve. I mean, we even do this sometimes if we have a lunch break, depending on what the weather is, and you put it right back into the sleeve that it came out of. And
I hope you're wearing rubber gloves.
yes, yeah, always wear rubber gloves because
Oh,
you'll be covered.
Yeah, that
But
would make a
basically,
mess.
you basically create an airtight seal, and then you just cover this up, and then you're good. Actually, probably for a couple of days if you had to come back.
I think I've seen painters. I've actually seen painters on jobs I've been on, and I couldn't figure. I thought they were taking them out to the trash, but what they would use actually even the plastic bags you get from the supermarket.
Correct. Yep.
They'd stuff a couple in there and they'd tie it in a knot.
Yep.
And they'd leave it. And I used to think the painter, left his brushes to be thrown out, but I did that one time. I threw his brushes out. I said, "I'll do him a favor. I'll throw them out for him." He got mad at me. I said, "Well, why'd you put them in a trash bag?" He said, and he explained to me that what you just explained. So I said, "Well, I thought I was doing you a favor, but that's a good tip." And again, if you, I buy the cheap ones, and I don't. I might save it for a day or two like that if I'm not done painting, but I'll usually throw them out.
Sure.
And that's a good tip, though. Is there anything else you want to?
Yeah, I mean, again, with the rolls, if you're doing, say you have a few rooms that you're doing, and you want to keep these for a couple of days, the other option you have is you can write right on the color.
Right on. That's so. That's
So that way there you have it right there, and you can just say, well, this is for the living room. You can put it right on there.
And that brings me to another question about that. Where you just, I worked again on a lot of jobs, and there was different things the painters would do, and I used to ask questions. One painter would, I can't remember what it was. He did something on the door, on the top of the door. He wrote the date or something. I can't remember, the paint color or something. So if you want to do the can itself, I mean, you write the date, the room, everything on the top of the lid.
Yep. We typically do that. We write it on the lid. We have a master list, and there's another great trick that I've learned from my dad, which is going back a while now. So if you take a piece of blue tape or tape and you put it on the back of one of the electrical the plug covers.
Oh yes.
Because you're going to take those covers off to paint.
Yes.
So anytime you take the cover off, you'll have the paint listed right there from the previous person that did it.
But you have to mention to the homeowner if they sell the house.
Right.
To make how many people are going to remember that? That's
Right.
my problem is when I try to label things and I try to do things so that 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, if I go to redo something, I have all the paint codes and the
Exactly.
right numbers. I can never find them. I always end up, they get shuffled away.
Yep.
Or, again, you know, that's a great trick on the back of the cover, of the outlet cover.
Yep.
But to remember that in 5
Right.
or 10 years, you think I'd remember that?
Well, I
Probably
mean,
not.
what we did, because a lot of people, when they move, a lot of people will take the paint and they'll throw it out. And if somebody moves in, they want to match that, you typically will. And, you know, if another painter comes around and they want to match the color, they have to take the plates off anyway. So they'll find the color right there.
That's a very good trick. Now, do you have any stories you'd like to share with our viewers? Something that kind of maybe funny that might have happened? I think that just to lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this business, I've learned to stay out of picking colors.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
there's a million stories about
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, trying to help somebody, and you know, quite honestly, I use somebody now that's what they do. They're a color consultant.
Oh, and they deal with the client,
Yep.
and all you do is you get the paint, and if there's an issue, it's nothing to do with you guys.
Right.
I'm in the same business where people ask me my opinion,
Yep.
and I'm dealing with a client now who asked me my opinion on something. I said, I think it'll look really nice, but everybody's taste is so different
Right.
for what you like and what somebody else might like.
Exactly.
I try not to. I try to help people in a certain way, but there's kind of it's a tricky area, especially with paint, because
Colors. I mean, it's everything subjective. It's all your personal preference. You know, I might like green. You might like blue. I mean, it really comes down to what you like.
Let me ask you, how many shades of white are there?
Oh, I mean, you can pick up. I mean, I think right now in some of these, between some of the major manufacturers, just in their color lines, there's I think 14,000 different colors.
Of what?
Of just choosing just from
Different colors.
whether it's off white all the way through. But I think as far as white, I mean, there's a couple of charts that I have currently that there's 50, 60 shades of white.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. At least.
I made the mistake one time, and this is kind of a funny story for the viewers that I have. I was painting our ceiling in our kitchen, and it's a rather large ceiling, and we had gotten more than halfway through, and my wife, she was the runner. She always would get the paint, so I didn't have to stop working. And she went to one home improvement store and came back with a gallon or whatever we thought we needed, and it didn't quite work out to be the 1 gallon. So she went for another gallon, but the other store was closer. So I said, white's white, ceiling white, ceiling white.
Right.
As long as it says ceiling white on the can.
Yep.
Well, after I painted the ceiling, I kept waiting for the new paint that I just put up to dry, because it had that shine to it,
Yep.
and the other side looked like it had dried. It's to this day, it still looks like it's
Yep.
wet.
Yep.
It was two different, I wouldn't say shades of white, but maybe one was more of a sheen, like a gloss
Yep.
versus a flat.
Yep.
And again, that's the difference of the shine versus the flat. There's different colors, but different sheens. We'll
Sheens.
say, yeah.
Yeah, they have. I mean, in ceiling paint, you typically would go with a flat finish
Flat.
on the ceiling, but when you're dealing with wall paint, you have anywhere now from what they call a matte finish, which is basically an upgrade from a flat. It's a washable flat, and then you have eggshell, satin, semi-gloss, gloss, and high gloss. So there's a number of sheens you can choose depending on where you are. Kitchens, you want to use a little bit more of a sheen just for washability.
Okay, and now where would the eggshell come in? Because we've used that a lot in our home.
Eggshell you typically would use in your common areas, your bedrooms, your living room, a place where you're really not going to have a lot of activity on the walls.
Okay.
Kitchen, you're typically cooking in there, and there's a lot more.
So what would that paint be again in the kitchen?
You probably want to use a satin finish in the kitchen.
A satin finish.
Yep.
Okay.
And they make a kitchen and bath paint actually specifically for kitchens and baths.
And why is that?
And it has to do with the moisture.
So it's like mold resistant
Exactly.
or something? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And is that a waterborne?
It is. Yeah, and
Wow.
it cleans up with soap and water.
There's so much to know. It's like you need a college education to learn all the different aspects
It's
of paint.
just a lot of products, and they're constantly coming out with the new green technology, with the different types of paint. With you can get paint now that pretty much has zero odor.
Really?
It's low Z or zero VOC paint they call it, and it just there's so many different things out in the market, and just knowing the right application for each helps.
Well, I got to admit, I was amazed when we did the ceiling paint, and this was going back at least 6 or 7 years ago. It actually was purple when we put it on.
Yep.
And I told my wife, I said, we wanted white paint.
Right.
She said, no, read the can, it turns white after it dries. But being purple, it was almost like a light shade of purple. It showed you where you actually put the paint so you could see if you missed any spots.
Yep.
I thought that was the most interesting thing, how that could turn from purple to white after it dried. I was amazed by that.
Yeah, they have that. They've had that product out now for years. And if you do a ceiling and if you're hesitant about where you're going to have coverage, exactly what you said, you put it on one color and it dries white.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's almost like, again, in our business your business too. We have caulking that you put it on and it's white and it dries clear.
Yep.
So you can. The reason for that is so you can see where your caulking line goes.
Exactly.
So you don't miss any spots.
Right.
And then it will turn clear. And I'm just amazed by the technology
Yep.
that we've come this far. And
Yep.
it's just.
I mean, they have magnetic paint now. They have chalkboard paint. They have dry erase paint.
Magnetic paint.
Magnetic
so things
paint.
will actually,
Yep.
you can stick your kids'
Yep.
report cards to it.
Yeah. So we do a lot of pantries and common areas where you walk in and mud rooms and stuff like that, where people make little notes and you can just stick a little magnet right on it.
That's so cool.
Yep.
I mean, what are we going to be in 10 years from now? You got to stay right on that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really so much. There's so much technology, like I said, and it's really just every year it seems like there's something else coming out.
Well, we're learning a lot here today. I know that. I've learned from our last show to today. I've learned a little bit more every time. So I hope our viewers could get some of that information that I got. Again, Dan, why don't you give our listeners, our viewers, your website, maybe some way they can get in touch with you, your email address?
Sure. My website's www.massegroup.com, and my email address is dan@massegroup.com, MASSE group.com.
There you have it. Dan,
I appreciate it, Steve.
thanks for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you.
And we're running pretty short on time. I want to thank all our viewers for watching the show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I want to thank Dan from the Masse Group for coming. He did a wonderful job. And feel free to give him a shout if you need any information. And my website is www.finisheddimensions.com, or you can email me at finisheddimensions@yahoo.com. And that about does it for another show. Thanks again, and we'll see you the next time on Around the House.